Success transcends cities. As one of the world's most respected business leaders, I know what it takes. Join me now as I sit down with fellow leaders and we share our insights into how you can be successful. My name is Jeffrey Hayzlett, and this is All Business. Listen, my friends, how do we create a winning culture combining 21st century leadership with old school principles? That's the big question. And that's the one question we'll ask Steve White today. He's the president and special counsel to the CEO at Comcast Cable. And he's also here today to discuss his journey to reach the American dream. 7 tips for discovering your purpose and why getting fired was the best thing that happened to him. Welcome, Steve.
Hi, Jeffrey. I'm so honored to be here with you. Thank you for inviting me today.
You bet. I can't wait to start talking about how we got fired, because I've done that a couple of different times, and I imagine a couple more before this is over with. You know, culture has become more than a buzzword. Now it's even being used as a recruiting tool. How does a business create a winning culture? Because it's a lot more than foosball tables in the break room and summer Fridays, right?
Yeah, it's such a good question, Jeffrey. Everything starts with defining it, because culture can take you a lot of different places, but we know a winning culture with the right people is the key to success. So the first thing you have to do is define it. What kind of organization are you trying to create? What is it that you want this company to be, as they say, when it grows up? And now you can start putting systems and practices in place that align with that culture. The second piece is you've got to hire people that believe in that kind of culture. They believe in those traits, and they believe in trying to create that environment for the entire organization. So that's how you start it. And then number 3, you have to have regular checkpoints along the way. Let's call them truth tellers that'll put a mirror up to the company to say, are we living our values? Are we creating that culture? And then number 4 is constantly reinventing and adjusting, staying true to your core, but adjusting and to reflect the needs of the organization.
You know, Steve, for a long time, a lot of leaders were saying, hey, it's my way or the highway. I mean, there was a lot of way the business was built that way. How should we be creating an organization of inclusiveness through purpose?
Well, I think everything starts bottom up, Jeffrey, but let me just be clear. Leaders cannot delegate leadership. So I'm going to use an analogy here. The leader gets to decide where we're going. So if the leader says we're going to Miami, that's critical. I cannot delegate that responsibility. So let's be very clear about it. But here's how we get all the voices in the room. I didn't say how we were going to get to Miami. Are we going to drive? Are we going to catch a bus? Are we going to hitchhike? That's where you can create an inclusive environment by getting input from how we get to Miami. And that's how I believe the steps to creating a more inclusive organization starts. Now everyone feels like an owner, not a renter, Jeffrey, in the enterprise. And when you get everyone thinking like an owner, that creates a very, very special environment.
So I'm going to follow up with that one, because the workplace has evolved so much in recent years. What's the best way to lead our teams with purpose and intentionality?
Well, the first thing is you've got to identify and communicate over and over. What is your purpose? Why do we exist? Every company exists for a reason. Jeffrey, one of my favorite quotes is a Mark Twain quote. The 2 most important days in your life is the day you're born. The second is when you know why. Same thing for a business. The day you're born, and the second is, why are you in business? And then taking that purpose and connecting that to your teammates in a way, in an authentic way where they can understand it, and then helping them understand how their individual purpose connects with that company. And so when you do that, understand you might lose a few people along the way because they're saying that's not the purpose I want to be tied to. And that's okay. It's better to find that out early than too late. So everything starts with you defining your purpose and then helping your teammates understand how their individual purpose connects to the bigger picture. But the 2 most important days in the life of a company, the day you're born, the second is when you really understand why.
Yeah, I love that. In fact, we talk about it in the C-suite of, what problem are we solving? That why or how. I love that. We're hearing a lot about what we call the great resignation. And a lot of people saying we're currently living in it. I like to refer to it as the great transformation. I like to put a little positive spin on it, not the negative side of that, because I think that's what really people are doing. They're finding their purpose, what they want to do, where they want to go, and they're just saying, look, I'm not doing that anymore. So how are we to cultivate greater employee retention as part of this great resignation or great transformation?
Yeah, that's such a great point. I call it the great reset. So you and I are on the same page. I call it the great reset.
High fives. We'll do some high fives.
There you go. High five. I love the way you're thinking here, but I like yours, transformation.
Well, I got to tell you, I stole it from somebody. I can't, but I'll take it as mine. I'll take credit for it. What the heck?
You're perfect. It's a free will country. But I think everything starts with building a level of trust with your relationship. I often get asked, Jeffrey, Steve, how do you lead 30,000 men and women? Well, first of all, you can't. I have to focus on my circle of influence, my top 16 leaders, my top 100 leaders. How do I make sure I'm in tune with what is their interest? What is their goal? And how do I find out what is their purpose? And then when I can now connect the company's purpose to what they're doing, that's how you create greater retention. Because let's be honest, there are a lot of people working from home that don't want to go back, and they don't want to go back because they're not truly connected to that company. Start with what is it they're trying to accomplish? What are your hopes and dreams? What is it you're trying to do? And how do you think our enterprise can help you reach your goal? Here's the point I want to make on that, Jeffrey. I often refer to myself as a business. I tell people often, I am CEO and chairman of Steve White Incorporated. I have 2 shareholders, my wife and my 9-year-old son, and maybe there's a dog coming along, so there'll be a half a shareholder coming along. But every organization has to treat every employee that way. What is your company? What are you trying to accomplish? And when you start having that relationship with your teammates, talking about their company and their interests, now you can begin the dialogue to what's important to them. And then you can start talking about how you can create a relationship where they never want to leave your company. But remember, everything starts with, I'm a business, and how can I best serve my business? And that's what employers need to start thinking about their employees as individual businesses.
You know, a lot of people talked about when it goes back to normal, you know, and there's never been a normal. I've never known a normal period, but we kind of referred to it like going back to the office. Are you back in the office?
No, we're not. We're starting to bring people back, but guess what? It's not going to be normal. We're going to a very flexible schedule where there might be 3 days on, 2 days off. Every organization is thinking about it differently, but here's where companies have to be very careful. But let's take Comcast as an example. We have a large frontline population. Let's take our technicians that are out in the field, out in the home. Well, they don't get the option to work from home. So as you develop these policies, you've got to ensure that you don't create a have and have not culture within your organization. You have to think very smartly about how you go about doing this, and not just saying, let's be flexible to be flexible. What is your vision? What are you trying to accomplish? And how do you make it in a way that it works for everyone in the organization, not just for the men and women that might be doing administrative things within what I call a four-wall office.
By the way, which do you prefer, going in the office or working from home?
I'm old school. I prefer being in the office. And I think this is what's really important, particularly, Jeffrey, as we talk about culture. It is difficult to create culture over Zoom calls. You can do your best. There's something about being one-on-one in meetings. And think about this. If you're a young leader, one of the ways I developed, just being in the room with the CEO or the division president or the senior vice president as a young leader, just soaking it in is so critical. You can't do it. So I advise people, where possible, try to get back to the office with some flexibility, but boy, don't miss out on the opportunity. And if you're a leader trying to decide what you like because you have the option, try to get as much face time as possible. It's not about being political. It is about developing, growing, and learning.
It's an old saying, out of sight is out of mind. And
that's exactly right.
In the corporate world, I mean, folks, I don't care whether you're working from home or working, you know, in the office. If you're out of sight, you're out of mind. You want that face time. You know, and I had a guest last week who was talking about how lonely we are, that we're actually seeing a lot of people who are feeling very lonely, even when they're in the office. And that gets back to inclusiveness. Well, let me ask you a question about characteristics you look for when you hire someone. What do you look for?
Well, certainly I look for functional competence, but here are three things that I want on my team all the time. Number one, I want somebody who's team oriented. If it's about you, boy, you're not going to do well on my team. Are you team oriented? Do you get just as much satisfaction as the team succeeding as you do as an individual? Number two, and I call this being smart, and I'm not talking about valedictorian smart, but really successful executives, Jeffrey, they have a natural curiosity. They're always saying, can we do this better? Is there another layer to this? Let's not stick here. Can we push further? There's a natural curiosity. I call it curiosity with smarts. And then number three, I like having a good chip on my shoulder. I want people that are hungry on my team. And Jeffrey, they're not competing against someone else. They're competing against themselves. So every night before they go to bed, they can look in the mirror and they know if they've given it all. So when you have men and women on your team that are smart, team oriented, and they're competing against themselves because they want to prove to themselves they can reach their full potential, now you've got the makings of a very special team. And then you can bring in the functional capability and competence. I always look for that second. I look for those core traits first, then I'll start worrying about the functional capability. And so as our listeners think about new jobs or trying to be better in their job, think about those core traits, because that ultimately is what separates folks that go up the ladder versus the ones that stay stagnant.
So job promotion isn't something that comes as often as it did in years past. I mean, listen, for a lot of us, we were lucky to survive. And quite frankly, as I said to our own team and to many other teams, you're lucky to have a job because of what we went through. It was very tough for people. So if you're not getting promoted, can anything be done to rectify that? I think you talk about 5 steps of getting back on track or something.
Yeah. I think one of the most important things, Jeffrey, is you have to start redefining what promotion is all about. Promotion is not about just going straight up the ladder. It is about creating these other opportunities to gain experience, because ultimately the leaders that get to the top, they've accumulated a level of experiences and different job responsibilities that make them more attractive for the big jobs. So don't look at promotions as straight up. Look at promotions as opportunities to expand your skill set so you can develop and get to the next level.
So as I look at your journey, and it's an incredible journey, something you referred to as from the projects to president. Can you describe that journey for us? How did you reach your version of the American dream?
Well, I tell people I was the perfect setup to be a victim. Single mother, housing projects of Indianapolis, raised 4 boys, 8th grade education, cleaning motel rooms. But along the way there, Jeffrey, there's so many people that gave me a hand up, not a handout. That's different. A hand up is an opportunity to really display your real talents and skills. And so one of the key characteristics we all need to bring is to be present. Opportunities are always coming our way, but we have to be present. We have to be in the moment to recognize when those opportunities are presented to ourselves. And then the second one is there are only 2 things you can control: attitude and effort. Score an A+ in those 2 areas. I promise you, executives and other leaders will be attracted to you, and that will be the opportunity to display what you really bring to the table.
I love how we reach back down. There was a famous actor who once said, once you get to the top, you got to remember to send the elevator back down for everybody else. And
That's
it kind of gets to my next question, because how you grew up affects how you raise your son. So what are you looking to instill in him? What are you setting down that 9-year-old and starting to do so that, you know, what's in you gets to him?
Well, number one is you lead by being a great role model. One of the interesting things about the pandemic is my 9-year-old could see me working at home. So he would wake up in the morning, see his dad in the office. He would come home after school and get ready to go to bed. His dad is still working there in the office. And it was his first real exposure from a role modeling standpoint to see what real work is like. And that created a lot of conversation with him. Well, why are you doing it this way? What are you doing it this way? The second is setting expectations. I shared the story. I was at Harvard Business School about 5 years ago. I called my wife up and I said, hey, what size t-shirt does my son wear? But guess what, Jeffrey? I ended up buying 7 or 8 different types of shirts, all different sizes. So 4 years later, he's still wearing Harvard Business School t-shirts. Now, whether he goes to Harvard or not, that's not the point. The point is we've now set expectations that higher education is not something to think about. It is assumed. And he's now already thinking about, Dad, when I go to Harvard, do I have to become a Boston Celtic fan? I said, no, we hate them. No, just kidding.
Hey, you have to. What are you kidding me? You got to be a Celtic fan if you're Boston.
But he's already talking, do I have to become a Celtic fan? But the expectations have been set. So role modeling, setting a clear set of expectations, and they're really talking about, what's important. So unlike my life, he is starting on third base. When I was growing up, I didn't even know there was a game being played. I didn't even know where the arena is. So we're now teaching him that you're on third base. Now your responsibility is how do you get to home base and around the bases, but bring others along, and just really instilling those basic values.
By the way, my producer's whispering in my ear about Boston, says it can't be a Boston Red Sox fan, it has to be a Yankees fan.
There you go. There you go.
We got to bring in these rivalries wherever we can. You've also talked about discovering your purpose. What are your 7 tips, or as many tips as we could squeeze in, for doing that?
Well, the book is called Uncompromising, and it really focuses on living your purpose. So step number 1 is you got to find your purpose. The 2 most important days of your life, as we talked about, is the day you're born. The second is why. So understanding why you were placed on this earth. Number 2 is focus on the real prize. There are a lot of distractions out there, Jeffrey. How do you stay uniquely focused on your purpose? And that's where the title Uncompromising comes in. Number 3, live life as a learning lab. If you're not winning, you're learning. There's no such thing as losing. How do you continue to hone your craft and live your life as a learning lab? Number 4, we talked about this think and act like a business. I'm Steve White Incorporated. So how do I think about my life and my career as my own business? And how do I develop it and grow it? Number 5 is how do you own your attitude and effort? I talk about several stories that will hopefully inspire readers. Number 6 is getting comfortable with navigating uncertainty. Life is full of uncertainty. There's no straight line to success, Jeffrey. You and I talked about getting fired 1 or 2 times. So there's no straight line to success, but getting comfortable with navigating uncertainty. And then finally, commit to what I call road dog relationships. None of us get to this point without the help of others. Develop those unique relationships, what I call truth tellers, that'll help you stay on your path to success.
Speaking of someone who helped you, who was that? Who was one of those people for you?
Well, there are too many to mention. Certainly my mother helped me from a foundational standpoint. My lovely wife, Barbita, has been there every step along the way. We've moved 11 times in my corporate career. So having people like that by your side that are truth tellers, that are supporting you, and Jeffrey, where they see things in you that sometimes you don't even see in yourself, having those road dogs around you are critical to your success.
I love that. You mentioned just a minute ago, one of the tips was running our life like a business. Tell me more about that.
Yeah, so let's think about it. When you think about a company like Comcast or any business, they have long-term plans. They have a clear mission statement. They have clear values. They invest in their business for the long term. They don't make short-term decisions. So take the same mindset to your own career. How do you think long-term? Don't think short-term. How do you develop a strategic plan? What are your values? What are your mission? So just like a company would go about doing it, you start thinking about yourself as a company, and that's how you approach it. The other thing is when companies face heartache or challenges, they don't get emotional. They get very calm and they think very long term. So if you're in a situation like you and I talked about our situation of getting fired, we could have turned that into a very negative situation. We tried to turn that into fuel to drive our future career. So think about your life as a business. It'll help you think more objectively, more long-term. And those are the individual businesses that are still relevant and survive.
Getting fired, it's just helping to set conditions of satisfaction. You got to have a little bit of debate. You might have pushed a little too far. Didn't push it enough. Who knows what, but that's a great way of being able to do it. We also talk about in our Hero Club, and a big part of that is giving back and paying it forward. And those are 2 values that you live by. How are you paying it forward?
Well, number 1 is when you think about your own career, how do you develop the next set of leaders? One of the things I was most proud of when I moved over from being president of Comcast West to special counsel to our CEO, one of the gentlemen that worked for me for 10 years moved into that job. So always constantly think about how are you developing the next generation of leaders. There are a couple of organizations I'm involved with, New Leaders, where we focus on the leadership and development of public school principals, because we know, Jeffrey, and you know, that education is critical for the next generation if we expect them to continue to take this country to the next level. So focusing in areas like that, I serve as executive in residence at Denver University, where I'm helping young people, and we're really focusing on leading with ethics. Because you would think, why do I have to teach people about ethics? Well, I don't need to tell you, you know what's happening in the world. So really focusing in those areas have helped us be very, very successful.
Yeah, we're seeing a lot of fraud out there, especially in a lot of executive positions, which is unfortunate. So you have a book out that's called Uncompromising: How an Unwavering Commitment to Your Why Leads to an Impactful Life and Lasting Legacy. And it's in that uncompromising is what you say is staying true to yourself. So what is important to you?
Well, what's important to me is my why is how do I create a table of prosperity for as many people as possible? Because one of the reasons I got fired early on in my career, I was leading my first team, and I thought it was all about me. I thought my purpose and why was to create an environment for my family so they could be successful, they could get out of poverty. But I realized that my real purpose was serving others. That's how you create, great success. And so I got fired. And fortunately, one of my mentors hired me, brought me in, and really demonstrated to me how do you create an environment of inclusiveness as well as caring for your people. And then once I started focusing there, Jeffrey, it's amazing what happened in my career. I'll give you one quick story. I was part of a takeover. Company took us over. Of the top 50 executives, 48 got fired, only 2 remained. I was one of those, and I asked them after they made me an offer, why me? You were going in a different direction. They said, Steve, we were going to fire you, but the more and more we talked to the employees, they kept talking about, yes, these are things are not right. But let me tell you about Steve White. And after about 5 or 6 conversations, that opened their eyes and said, well, maybe we should give Steve White another look. And that's what happens. So if you want to get promoted, you can't do it yourself. Your people have to push you up. That's how you get elevated. That is how you got noticed. And that's what happened for me.
You know, I always like to delve into people's background a little bit too, if I can, Steve, because you said you moved like 11 times. I know what that's like. My father was in the military. We did that. And then all of my career, I have continued gone to one place after another. But I always use South Dakota as my base and home, and always had a place to come back here. Tell me a little bit about the progression. Where did you start? And then how did you get to where you're at? Because a lot of people think it's a lot shorter, and it's usually a pretty long road.
Well, I always start with Indiana University, because until my junior year in high school, college was not even something that was in the realm of possibilities until people started asking me about it, and teachers and instructors. And I started to believe that I could go on. I was the first in my family to go, but I went to Indiana University, majored in journalism and business. I decided I wanted to make a little bit more money than what journalism offered. And I started working with a company called American Hospital Supply. And most good companies, they start off new executives carrying a sales bag. If you can survive selling the products, knowing the product, understanding the product, convincing others to buy the product, what a great way to come into the company. And that's how I got started. So from American Hospital Supply to Pepsi to Colgate-Palmolive, and I've been in the cable industry for the last 22 years. And at the time, cable was considered the wild, wild west. But can you imagine a world today, Jeffrey, where we didn't have broadband, we didn't have video? So I got in at the right time, and I was part of an industry that really has reinvented itself and really made a difference in everyday life.
What kind of lasting legacy do you want to leave behind?
Well, I love this quote. That we all die twice, Jeffrey, the day that somebody puts us away in a grave or a mausoleum. The second is the last day that somebody mentions our name. I think we should all strive long after we're gone. People are still mentioning our name in a very positive way. So my hope is that the fruit, based on the seeds that I planted, are on multiple trees, and people are still mentioning my name 30, 40, 50 years after I'm gone, because I made a small impact in their life. And so that's my greatest hope.
That's well said. Well, and I wish you the best in that. And thanks so much for being right here with us on All Business with Jeffrey Hayzlett right here on C-Suite Radio, C-Suite TV.
Great. Thank you, Jeffrey. It's been an honor.
Hey, at the end of every show, I like to talk about what I learned. Well, the big question was really about what problem we're solving. Now, he talked about it in terms of values and purpose. But as a business, we really have our birth, not only when we start, but when we figure out what problem we're solving. And that's a question that each of us needs to learn in our business every day. And that's what I learned right here on All Business with Jeffrey Hayzlett, right here on C-Suite Radio and C-Suite TV.
Welcome to Bestseller TV. I'm Taryn Winterbrill. We're here with Andrew Bryant. He's the author of Self-Leadership, 12 Powerful Mindsets and Methods to Win in Life and Business. It's great to have you with us.
Hi, Taryn. It's a pleasure to be here.
So, this is actually your second book on self-leadership. Clearly, you're passionate about the subject matter. Why? Why self-leadership?
Well, I think we all have the potential to be the best version of ourselves. Unfortunately, we don't get the handbook when we're born on how to be the best version of ourselves. And we get born with a whole bunch of frames of mind from our parents, our culture. And so self-leadership frees you up to choose how you want to be as a human being and to be successful in your life.
Okay, so let's just back up. So if someone said to you, Andrew, what is self-leadership? It's the title of your book. How do you define it?
Well, I wrote a book in 2012 with Dr. Anna Kazan, and we defined self-leadership as the practice of intentionally influencing your thinking, feeling, and actions towards your objectives.
Okay, so how do you do that? That's what the 12 powerful mindsets and methods encompass?
They are. So
Okay.
You have to have self-awareness to know what your existing mindsets or frames of mind already are. So self-leadership starts with that self-awareness. And with that, then you can become intentional about what it is you want to achieve.
So who is this book for then, as you were writing it? Who is the ultimate reader? Is this for someone who's already a leader, is trying to become a leader? Is this for someone who is reporting to a leader?
The answer is yes, both of
Okay.
those.
I love when I ask a question, or, and you go, yes.
Yes, I could have stopped there. Yes,
Right.
and.
Uh-huh.
So I'm a coach to senior leaders, and they all need to develop self-leadership. Often somebody gets to a leadership position and then hits a glass ceiling because what got them there won't get them to the next level. They hit that barrier. So they need some self-awareness to break through that. The function of leadership is not to create more followers, but to create more leaders. So many of the leaders I coach then use my book or these methodologies to bring up their team, to increase their leadership bandwidth.
Okay, right, because I said to you off camera before we started, when I first saw the book, I thought to myself a little bit of an oxymoron, because leadership to me is leading others, but the word self in there seemed like an introspective concept. So how do you combine self with being a leader?
Well, leadership starts with self. You can't lead somebody else if you're not leading yourself. Do as I say, not as I do.
Right.
And so self-leadership is the core. I mean, we know we have dysfunctional leaders. We know the growth of a company is completely limited by a dysfunctional leader.
Mm-hmm.
And so they must have self-leadership first before they can invite other people to step up and have autonomy and choice and creativity and innovation.
So you mentioned this earlier, but do you think this is innate in any capacity, or this is all taught? Is anyone born a leader, or great leaders today are doing something?
We're all born self-leaders, right? So the whole concept of coming into life is its pure potential. The self-leadership is taken away. Our autonomy, our choice is taken away very early in life. You're told, don't do that, right? So children around 2.5 years old
That's true.
create, you hear your child go, mine. They take ownership of their personal space. They're beginning to develop an ego. Ego is not a bad thing. Egotism is a bad thing. So a child is developing a sense of self, and then that gets crushed, sometimes by schooling, by parents, by society. And so the ability to develop a sense of self, a healthy sense of self, is a journey for all of us through life.
So how are the two books different? Do they follow, or are they still separate entities?
They're the same concept from a different angle. The first book I wrote in 2012 with Dr. Anna Kazan is the textbook. In fact, it's used on some MBA programs. It's
That's terrific.
It's our research on self-leadership, which is
Right.
an evolution from self-management. So we get to define the concept. This book was, it was inspired by my wife, who said, could you rewrite the book so that people can read it in under an hour?
Yeah.
Because people don't, you want people to read the book, and people don't read big books anymore unless they have to.
People don't even read emails anymore.
But this is true.
Right.
So this book, you can read in under an hour, yet it's profound. I receive emails from all over the world saying, "Oh, this book changed my life."
Right.
And yet it's a small book, but because it's distilled, it gets the essence very quickly.
No, it is. It is very user-friendly. What do you think the biggest mistake is? Someone who says that it changed my life. What do you think they were doing before? I mean, what's the biggest mistake people are making in this capacity?
Well, it's very easy to spot the absence of self-leadership. It's blame. It's the victim mindset. It's being random or oblivious to how you're interacting with the world. So very easy. Judgment, blame, randomness are the symptoms of non-self-leadership.
And just tell us a little more about how you came up with it, your background. How did you formulate these ideas? I mean, what's the genesis?
Okay, so I have to do the join the dots backwards speech as Steve Jobs did at his commencement. I started my career as a physiotherapist. I graduated in England way back in 1982. I did a couple of years in hospitals, and then I did what most male physiotherapists do, is I got involved in sport. I was on the medical team of a first division soccer club. I worked with ballet dancers and with Olympic athletes. And I moved from fixing people up to preparing them for performance.
Right.
And very quickly you realize there's the physical and there's the mental.
Right.
Now, as a physiotherapist, I'd studied psychology as an undergraduate, but the psychology that we had in the 1980s, sports psychology hadn't been invented, positive psychology hadn't been invented. So I researched and we practiced visualization, hypnosis, neurolinguistic programming, neurosemantics. I even have a postgraduate in traditional Chinese medicine.
Wow.
So I was finding out what makes a difference. Then I moved to Australia. I was successful helping people to perform at sports teams. Then my own life took a turn. I was an entrepreneur. And my industry in health and wellness got disrupted. And in the year 2000, I was broke, lost everything.
Wow.
And then I had to apply these very success methodologies to myself. And so what works, what doesn't, I was a test case.
Wow. So you were the guinea pig.
Yeah, so it's easy to help somebody else. It's a lot harder to help yourself sometimes.
So you said, as a physiotherapist with all these exceptional athletes, so you started treating them physically, but then ultimately it turned into emotional and mental?
Yes.
Therapy?
So that became the thing that I got a lot more excited about, is what's the difference that makes the difference? Two people train exactly the same, but one wins, one doesn't.
Right. So what, if you had, in a nutshell, what is it?
It is the intentionality. It is the self-awareness of what your strengths and your weaknesses, the acceptance of that. It's self-confidence, and something that we talk about in the book called self-efficacy, the self-belief to try something new. A lot of us can be confident in what we do, but self-efficacy is the belief that we can do something new. Now, you're confident to do this. This is your profession. You're very good at this. I'm confident speaking to people one-to-one and one-to-many, but I'm not confident when you put a camera in front of me. So
I think you're doing great.
well, it's very kind of you. But I have to stretch myself to do something new. So we all need to do that.
So you think that's a big part of it is just sort of self-limitation?
Absolutely. People limit themselves in so many ways, but they're unconscious often of how they're limiting themselves.
Right.
Whether it's through their language, I can't do that, I shouldn't do that, I mustn't do that, or whether it's just behaviorally. And an athlete needs to stretch, and a business person needs to stretch. As a speaker, you notice on the stage a lot of ex-sports people become speakers and motivate crowds. And the sporting analogy is good up until a point. A game, whether it's 90 minutes, 120 minutes, whatever the sport is, has a singular goal, right? And there's an end point. But in business, that goal is always moving, and there are multiple simultaneous goals. So I shifted from the sports piece to working with business teams, with leaders, and using the same mindsets.
Interesting. What was the biggest difference working with the athletes versus the business leaders? Because you said it's the same concepts you're applying to both, but I guess it's how they execute them, right?
The difference is the layering of the goal and the culture. So in sport, you'll have a team culture,
Right.
But you're very clear. I want to win a championship.
Right.
And to win a championship, I have to win a series of games, or to win a race, there's a finish line. In business, there's ambiguity, and the big difference is there's me, there's others, and there's the culture, and then
Right.
there's the organizational goal. So to navigate that as a self-leader is much more complicated.
So if someone said to you, what's the difference between self-leadership and leadership, Andrew? How would you answer that?
Self-leadership is leading yourself. So by leading yourself, you positively influence others.
Okay.
And that becomes what leadership is. Leadership is influence versus manipulation, right? You can manage people, do this or you're fired.
Right.
Right? You lead people by inspiring them through a vision, and you lead people by creating a culture where people can step up and be the best version of themselves. So I don't think there's a difference. I think it's a continuum.
Right. Is there any real life examples you can give us? Any mentors of yours or someone who does this really well, who made that shift that you can think of, that whether it's someone uber famous or someone personally in your own life?
Well, earlier this year I was speaking in Cape Town, South Africa, and I got the opportunity to do the Robben Island tour where Nelson Mandela was in prison. And here's a man that was driven by a passion as a revolutionary,
Right.
is incarcerated for that. But at Robben Island, locked up in a cell, although his body was incarcerated, his mind was free. And
Love
in
that.
fact, the fellow inmates with Nelson Mandela, they called Robben Island the university. They educated themselves and they became free. And so when he was released, he was a true self-leader. He had let go his frames of mind, his anger, his frustration, and focused on helping others. Paradoxically, self-leadership is not selfish. Once you know how to lead yourself, you're not needy, so you have the opportunity to help others.
Right, and I'm glad you mentioned that, because some people might ascertain self-leadership as selfish.
Yeah, absolutely not. I mean, every time you jump on an aeroplane, right, the steward or stewardess says, should the oxygen mask fall from the ceiling, place over your nose and mouth before assisting others.
Right.
And they tell you that because unless you have the oxygen, you can't help anybody else.
It's a great analogy.
So it is. So self-leadership is, you need to know what your intention is, you need to know what you need, and then once you've got that done, then you can be much more sharing. I mean, you look at Bill Gates, he's driven for his business. Now he's in a stage of life where he can, he has everything he needs, so he can pay it forwards.
Yeah.
You have Elon Musk, who is, building things that are going to be available to humanity after he leaves.
We just want to tease the audience a little bit because, like we said, the book is so user-friendly. It's a
Yeah.
quick read, but quality versus quantity. There's a lot to get out of this quick read. Just the quick process of it all, because I was going to touch upon self-confidence, but just a couple of the things you mentioned. Self-awareness leads into self-confidence and self-efficacy, which you mentioned earlier. Is it a process that has to go in that order, or is it one size fits all, or what would be your advice on that?
Well, those three S's, the self-awareness, the self-confidence, and the self-efficacy, are the inner game.
Right.
And the outer game of self-leadership, of course, is the intentionality leading to influence and the impact you have in the world. So the inner game that we're playing, self-awareness, who am I, what are my strengths, how am I perceiving the world? The self-confidence is how do I express those strengths? We should be confident. We are the best version of ourselves.
Right.
And confidence is incredibly important because it modifies how everybody else perceives us.
Yeah, I would say that's really the backbone of this whole
Absolutely.
situation you got going on here.
Yeah, you could write the whole book on self-confidence,
Right.
yeah, but there are many books on confidence. And a lot of people have had their confidence robbed from them. Right? And also culturally, as you know, I've been based in Asia for the last 13 years. And they get very confused around confidence versus arrogance. Because culturally, in Asia, humility is a very big thing. People want to be
Right.
humble. But humility is not the absence of confidence. Humility is, in fact, not making yourself less than somebody
Right.
else. It's having an accurate, neither overestimated nor underestimated view of your own abilities. Right? So you're good at things, and I'm sure there are things you're not good at. Right? There are things I'm good at and things I'm not good at. If somebody is saying, I'm good at everything, I'm the best, I'm the most wonderful, then we're going to be a little suspect.
Where have I heard that before? Someone coming to mind.
We're going to be a little suspect around that, right? So confidence is knowing what you're good at, and when you're confident, you can say, well, actually, that's not my thing. I'm not good at that. Right? So with that self-awareness, you can be confident, and then there's no arrogance in that because you're being accurate.
Yeah.
If you've done it,
Right.
It's not bragging, right?
I'm glad you mentioned Singapore because you've been living in Singapore for the last 13 years.
Yes.
Is that right? Fascinating. How has that impacted your view on the subject matter?
Well, it's great. I'm English by birth, and then I traveled to Australia, and then moving to Asia. It totally broadens my horizons because I live in Singapore, but I travel across Asia, and you get to know that nobody has, a monopoly on a world viewpoint, right? East versus West. Well, the truth is somewhere in the middle. It shows just different people have just equally valid ways of looking at the world. So it's fantastic, traveling to China or Thailand or Vietnam or India and seeing how different people approach life. You also get to see how impactful culture is on what people believe is possible for themselves.
Sure.
And then here in North America and seeing particularly here in New York, seeing the melting pot of perspectives. So I feel now having traveled around the world, I can sort of step back from culture and ask, what's working?
And just curious, aside from your perspective living in Singapore, people might be wondering, why do you live in Singapore?
Well, it was one client that I went to Singapore for, which was Singapore Airlines. So I was living in Australia at the time. Singapore Airlines flew me into Singapore and then flew me all over the world as I put in a leadership and culture change for them. And then I just liked staying there because the airport's easy to get to everywhere in Southeast Asia.
Right.
And now I travel the world, and here I am in New York, and for me, it's a globe,
Right.
and I'm happy to move or live anywhere. But I'm
sure.
really looking forward to spending some more time here in North America.
Yeah, but it must be amazing. So you have, you're based there, but you're all over the place. So you must have this amazing just influx of all these different influences constantly influencing you.
Yes, very much so. And it helps you to step back and always check for your own bias, your own viewpoint, and go, does this work? Is this effective?
So will that be your next book, incorporating foreign culture?
I have looked at culture, and I have a book that I started working on, particularly around leading cultures within organizations. Because there are many, many books on culture of nationalism. But what we have now in a global society, or more globalization, is culture within business.
Sure.
Right? So if Google sets up an office in Shanghai, is it Google culture or Chinese culture? So the challenge is between the national culture versus the corporate culture. And again, it comes down to what's going to allow people to be the best version of themselves so they can be creative, innovative, and create an impact in the workplace.
Well, it's terrific. We're out of time. Just a real quick question to end it on. A lot of leadership books out there. Andrew, how would you say yours is different?
It's different because it approaches it from the inside out.
Okay.
And it's something that everybody should get done first. Before you attempt to lead others, make sure you put your own house in order, and this book will help you do that.
Yeah, and it's a great read. Like I said, it's user-friendly, and it moves fast. I mean, this took me mere minutes, but you get so much out of it. So congratulations. And I know you're working on other books. They're in the works, so we're excited to have you come back.
Yes. So the one I missed to tell you about is the one on the entrepreneur mindset, and I'll maybe see you next year when that one's out.
We'll be here. Thank you again for making the trip.
Thank you.
And if you'd like more information on the book, just check out our website. It's c-suitebookclub.com. That's c-suitebookclub.com. I'm Taryn Winterbrill. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time right here on Bestseller TV.
Welcome to C-Suite TV Insights. I'm Greg Greenberg. Everybody knows the old adage, better safe than sorry, but how can a leader create a culture of safety in an organization? Here to explain how companies can profit from putting safety first is Eric McCrowski, President and CEO of Propolo. Welcome, Eric.
Great to be here. Thank you, Greg.
All right, so why should safety be included in a C-suite level agenda?
Simple. A good business is a safe business. If you focus on safety and running a great safe culture, you also get great outcomes at the end of the day. Think about Alcoa and how they transform by focusing on safety first.
What is safe production and why should this be a focus?
Safe production is really about the evolution of just safe culture. In the past, a lot of organizations looked at safety culture on the left, at customer experience on the right, and then just running a good business in front of them. The fact is you only have one corporate culture, and you need to have a focus that looks at safety, but also driving productivity, which you need to be in business for.
Why do people make unsafe behavior choices in the first place, and what can you do to change this behavior?
A lot of it is really going down to the attitudes, the beliefs, the mindsets of team members. In terms of how, when I look at something, how do I make a safe choice to drive the right outcome each and every time? And that's really what we try to shift, that focus on the attitude, the belief, the mindset of team members, so they make the right choice and they own their safety.
How effective are behavior-based safety programs?
They've had their time in place. They've had great outcomes in a lot of organizations, but they've typically pushed and plateaued. It's time to start looking beyond just behaviors and start engaging team members in terms of those attitudes, those beliefs, those mindsets, so that I'm doing the right choice, the right decision for myself, not just because somebody's watching for me.
If you're a leader in an organization and you want to make 1 or 2 small steps to increase safety in your organization, what should they be? What would be most impactful?
I think the most impactful thing you could do as a leader would be to start focusing on active care, to show that you truly care about the individual, the team member that's in front of you, that you know them deep down, you understand what matters to them and what drives them. Why would they want to stay safe for themselves? So you can focus on that. The second would be investing in the leadership skills of your teams so that your teams are leading all your frontline team members to make the right choice consistently.
And if I want to improve my overall performance, so things like safety and quality and production, where do I start?
First thing, you need to understand your current state culture. What's driving team members to make safe or unsafe choices? If you understand the current culture, then you can start driving the right strategies that are going to look at vision, that are going to look at leadership skills, that are going to look at your metrics and reward systems, everything that's needed to drive the right outcomes.
And then finally, you're actually writing a book about safety. What drove you to do that?
Well, unfortunately, 20 years ago, I started my career and I started seeing a lot of people getting injured. And I was responsible for a lot of their care profiles and seeing what happened when they suffered an injury. And often it was a little mistake that they made that prevented them from working for forever. And that impacted them financially, with our loved ones and so forth. And I wanted to find ways to drive businesses so that this wouldn't happen again to anybody else.
All right, well, thanks a lot for coming in and speaking about
Thank
it.
you.
And you be safe out there. And thank you for watching C-Suite TV Insights. I'm Greg Greenberg.